In your roots, you're a radio man, you're a broadcaster, but everybody knows you as the voice of the club, the voice of the matchday experience at the Amex.
Okay, we're live, 3, 2, 1, and I can see me come up on the big screen. And do I have a microphone? I have a microphone.
Your scramble when Fabian made 3 substitutions and seeing who was walking off where on the pitch.
Well, I'm thinking you can get one of those PhDs where you can apply because you've worked in the industry for so long, you can get it back. So I can be Dr. Richard Reynolds, which would be quite nice to have.
Rich, apart from being the only person in Britain who's straight down the middle on VAR, you do realise it's a binary choice, don't you? Okay. You can't be straight down the middle on VAR, but anyway, we'll pass over that. You are, in your roots, you're a radio man, you're a broadcaster, but everybody knows you as the voice of the club, the voice of the matchday experience at the Amex. Tell us how you got into stadium announcing at Brighton, how you landed the role.
You're right. So obviously I came through radio and I mean, initially I was working for Southern FM back in the mid-90s, and it was the big regional Sussex-based radio station. And when the Albion returned from exile in Gillingham back to Withdean, obviously it was the biggest news in town, and we were the biggest radio station in town, so we had to really wanted to get involved in it. So on that first match back at Withdean, they asked me and Nicky Kegshevelin from the Breakfast Show at Southern FM if we would go out, and here we are back at this, weird stadium.
Thought you were going to say wonderful for a second.
No, weird stadium, but at least it's in Sussex. And let's go. Can you G the crowd up and do the talking? So that was the very first involvement that I had working for the club.
So effectively, you're like Bez of the Stone Roses.
What's that?
You were a hype man.
Yeah, that was exactly it. That was basically
just
there to dance. That's what we did. And actually, on that first day, there'll be, if we talk about stuff here, there's a lot of stuff that in my job, in my position at the club, we like to be prepared, and things tend to go wrong when we get stuff thrown at us, and we have to kind of work around. So on that first day, that first match, it had kicked off, it had started, the match was underway, and then someone came over to me and said, "Oh, Kenneth Wolstenholme's here, he's a guest of the chairman, and would you interview him at half time?" Which we didn't know we had to do, and I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I said, we'll get him to the side of the pitch 5 minutes before half time, and I'll have a chat with him. So he arrived. Kenneth Wolstenholme, obviously legendary commentator. This is way before having phones where you could look everything up. So I'm like, well, this is 1999, isn't it? So it's like, okay. All we know about him is, what is he famous for? They think it's all over. It is now. Okay, so he got brought along, and it was quite evident that he'd been enjoying the chairman's hospitality, shall we say? And he was a little worse for wear. And I said, "It's great to meet you." And I was just thinking, what can we do that's different? Because why are you here? You're not a Brighton fan. You're not known for Brighton or anything, but you're here as a guy. And looking back, it was so convoluted and stupid. But I said to him, look, what we should do is we need to get your catchphrase out there. So at halftime, I'll walk you out into the centre of the pitch. We'll go towards the one main stand at the Withdean. And I'll say to you, because it's a first game back here, I'll say to you, well, Kenneth, how do you think today, how do you think the Albion fans are thinking now that they don't have to do that terrible journey to Gillingham and back? And you'll say they think it's all over.
Nice spontaneous interview.
It is now, exactly. And you'll say they think it's all over. It is now. And if this place had a roof, the roof will come off. Everyone will be laughing, great thing. Okay, fine, right. So we'll walk out. So, right, so I'll say, what do they think? They think. And you'll say, think it's all over. It is now. Brilliant. All right, half-time here at the Withdean Stadium. What a momentous day for the football club. And we've got a very special guest who's turned up here. We've got Kenneth Wolstenholme is here. Kenneth, legendary commentator, obviously very famous for the World Cup 1966. And Kenneth, here we are back in Sussex at last. And how do you think these Albion fans are thinking that they don't have to do that terrible journey back and forward to Gillingham? And he said, Well, they must be very pleased. And I was like, what? Okay. No, of course they're very pleased, but in your own inimitable way, how would you think they're thinking about not having to do that journey anymore? Well, they must be delighted. So I just went, ladies and gentlemen, Kenneth Wolstenholme, grabbed him and just pulled him off the pitch. And that was it. And so I thought, yeah, you need to prepare.
Did you not say to him, like, why did you not go with what we spoke about?
No, I didn't.
And did you not get your coat, get in your car and just drive home and look for a different job?
No, well, yeah, I felt like, yeah, you need to really prepare for these sort of things.
Well, you did prepare. You gave him his lines. And he fluffed them.
Maybe you should prepare for someone who hadn't had so much red wine. That's unfair to say. I don't know if he'd had a lot of red wine. It might have been white wine. You never know.
Announcing the teams and the changes and all the rest of it's not easy in itself. But the hardest part for you is standing on the pitch with 30,000 people staring straight at you, expecting you to entertain them with an interview. Is that the trickiest part of your job?
How do you find it, the reception you get to the interview?
So this season we've had this new sound system put in. I don't know if you noticed it, and it's brilliant. It's one of the best in the country, if not the best sound system in the country for a stadium, and it's made such a difference. So we went through all the previous years with a lot of people saying we can't hear what's going on and we can't hear the interviews. So there is that, but I'm very aware that all I'm doing is getting us from A to B, and it's not about me. They're not here for the interview at halftime. They're not here for this. They're here for the football. And you can be very precious about, let's do this and let's do that, but it's really just about you need to just facilitate the movement of this event that's happening. And you can think you've done the greatest interview in the world or the worst interview in the world or made the biggest cock up or whatever. And people have never noticed. It's because it's just a thing that's kind of going on in the background. It's not in their mind. Oh, I wonder what's happening on the pitch, And when you do get some great guests come on, then people take it very well.
Is it hard not to have a captive audience? Because obviously that in that period, they're busy around doing a lot of things. You're checking scores. You're going to the toilet. Going to buy something.
Yeah. I don't think people say to me, "Do you get nervous about it?" And I'm more nervous. I don't think about the 31,000 people, or when we were at Wembley. It doesn't I'd be more nervous doing a room of 50 people or a smaller event, because then you really are a centre of attention. So we're just not bothered. I just want it to go really well. And what happens is, so we would have like an hour and 15-minute build up to a kickoff. And I think at Brighton we do it really, really well. And I'm sure fans who've been to away matches will see how well we do it, because some other stadiums just don't really bother with doing very much at all, or it's a bit naff. And the amount of work that goes into what we present each home match is incredible. And the footage that we put up there and the links that we're going from one thing to another, and showing under 21s goals and showing, making sure that the women's team are involved at the Amex with footage up there. We do it really well, and our walkout routine is really, really good. So I just want it to get from when we start to when we finish. And the hardest thing for me, on a work day, the hardest thing for me is reading out the Brighton teams to the screen when they're coming up as doing what they call walk-ons. When you read out, the team number 5, Lewis Duncan, up his picture comes, because you've got to time that right. And once that's out of the way, it's like, it's fine. Everything's fine. And then the hardest bit from then on is when you suddenly get 5 substitutes in one go, or they change their mind.
I was party to that on Sunday. The first time, funnily enough, in all the years I sat next to Richie, and it wasn't because of the podcast, it was just coincidence. And what I found quite impressive, because this is difficult, but when you can hear your own voice feedback a couple of seconds delay, and you don't let that put you off, and that might sound really...
No, it's
nothing,
really
but it's really off-putting.
Yeah.
And also, your scramble when Fabian made 3 substitutions and seeing who was walking off where on the pitch.
Or you get 3 substitutions and then 2 for the away team as well, and you don't know which, because you've got to go with the board that the fourth is putting up. So, but you don't know which one's coming on first, or so you're just constantly looking at who's coming on and who's coming off. And so that we're in the Premier League, it's great because we get all that, we get all that information and we get boards. But things like pre-season friendlies, when it's 30, the whole squad is coming off, or
number 87 is coming on. Yeah.
I think the most difficult one, and I was very proud and lucky to do it. We had the England women's team playing the Czech Republic, but it was the under 21s, and the team sheet came out, and the under 21 Czech team, and I looked at these names and I thought, I have no idea.
And do you not get pronunciations?
Not on the Czech. So Premier League, as you know, we get pronunciations. All Premier League players have to do a talk to, it must be hilarious for someone like you. Yeah. How do you say Glenn Murray? But you have to do it, don't you? And so you can go to that portal and find out how every Premier League player likes their name said. Or, but Czech women's team under 21s, you couldn't even Google them. But so what you do then is you just grab a member of the Czech staff, a coach, and say, have you got a moment, could you just sit? And I've still got that pinned up in my office because it's the team sheet that just looks, the names did not correlate to how you pronounce them. So he went through it all with me, and it was crazy. There's a good one with, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, Ferdi Kadioglu, is it? Who's a lovely guy. He's been at the club for a short period of time, but he seems like a really nice guy, and I hope he doesn't mind me telling this story. But when I first met him, I said, Ferdi, how do you want me to say your surname? And he said, Kadioglu's fine. Okay, fine. And then about a week later, he was making his debut, and he was walking across the pitch before the match, and I thought we kind of knew that he was going to be in the team. So I said, hey, Ferdi, I just want to check, because you'll be playing today. How do you want me to say your surname? And he said, Kadioglu's fine. And I said, well, it might be fine, but I want you to tell me how you want it. I don't want it just to be fine. Let's get it right. And he went, well, he said, the thing is that the Turkish way of saying it is, it's like Cordiola. And I went, Cordiola? And he went, no, Cordiola. And I went, oh, sorry, Cordiola. And he went, no, Cordiola. I was like, what am I missing? Sorry, how are you saying it? And he went, Cordiola. And I went, Cordiola. He went, no, Cordiola.
You went, Kadioglu.
And we were walking down the tunnel, and by the time we got back to the sort of back end where the Premier League people are and the stewards are, they were saying, what are you two talking about? And I said, am I going, Ferdi, how do you say your surname? And he went, Cordiola. And Mel, who works for the Premier League, went, oh, Cordiola. And he went, no, Cordiola. And I'm going, it's not just me then. And he went, let's try it one more time. How is it? And he went, oh, Cordiola. And I went, Cordiola. And he went, no, Cordiola. And I said, you know what? I'm going to call you Kadioglu. And he went, that's fine. This is 2 minutes of my life.
You'll never get those 2 minutes back, will you?
That's your own fault for pushing him.
I know.
Too professional. So going back to the pre-match, you mentioned that part of your job, and you used this phrase, is whipping up the crowd.
Yeah.
Officially or not, that is what you do. And so how does that help the team when they come out? Because it must help the team if the crowd's in a state of high excitement when those players walk on the pitch. You probably feel like you've done your job to some extent.
Yeah, we like to. We also tell ourselves it's what we like to do, but it isn't for us. It's not our, if people say the atmosphere wasn't very good today, we can't blame ourselves.
That's not your
for
fault.
That.
No.
It's not our fault. We try our hardest, and sometimes the players, will say, "Oh, you need to turn it up," or "Can you play this music?" I mean, Glenn, did it make a difference to you if the crowd were whipped up to a frenzy, or are you too busy in your moment?
I think, as far as the players are concerned, they're busy. It's their work day of the week. Yeah. They're busy concentrating on what they want to do. They don't need any extra hype, so to say. They're ready to go. But I think touching on something that you said earlier, I think the more and more we have Premier League football and the world so-called best league, depending on your varied opinion, I think more and more clubs are going along this match day experience and making it as wholesome as possible, and getting as much out of it and making it. I mean, in all fairness, the prices of tickets are phenomenal for up and down the country. So I think the clubs should do as much as they can to make it super special every week, and obviously you're a massive part of that.
Yeah, so and the Amex now, we've got this big fan zone being built outside. It is all about
Will you be in the fan zone?
I don't know yet, actually. I don't. It hasn't been discussed, or I've asked, but it's all up in the air, so I don't know. I presume you are. You and Sidders will be in there. I don't know.
Maybe
you don't know. Yeah, speak to your agent. But I don't know, the whipping up the crowd thing. We try and we want, but it isn't down to us to do it. But
do you ever notice a difference? Do you ever think, oh, these are primed much easier than last week? So and can you see that depending on the opposition?
Yes.
So for instance, a Burnley or a Manchester United.
Yeah, definitely, or a Palace or whatever the big teams. I think so. Evening matches, it's normally a little better.
Sunday afternoon, flat. Not recent, just in general on a Sunday afternoon or an early Saturday.
Yes, I would agree with that. Flatter, not flat, but flatter.
Yeah.
Also, it's weird in winter when people are wearing gloves. It's an entirely different sound. It's a weird sound. It's so that there's that and. Yeah, time of kickoff and just what's happened before, or where you are in the league. It's all different things. So you try and keep this constant. This is what we're doing. I guess we were kind of lucky because we were around when the stadium was built. So the Amex was being built. So we started from scratch, and it was kind of like, we've got a blank piece of paper. What are we going to do an hour before kickoff, or how do we bring the teams out? And it was great. It was really crazy, like building up to that very first match. That Doncaster match was crazy because it was like, well, what are we going to play? What are we going to say? What are we going to do? We don't have history in doing anything, so let's do it how we want to do it. And back then, I do a lot of the music because of my background, so I was mixing stuff, and I mixed 5 or 6 different versions of Right Here, Right Now to play to Gus Point. Gus Point got involved with, I want us to come out to this.
It's changed so much, hasn't it? Because, I'm old enough to remember the stadium announcer being somebody who read out the team in a flat monotone, and then they would say, could the owner of a yellow Ford Cortina registration number please move it because you're blocking the catering entrance or whatever. That's what all a stadium announcer did. You weren't a kind of showman impresario. But I've never heard you stumble. This is a technical question, and Tom, who produces this radio show, I bet he's never stumbled either. There's a certain breed of person who can sit in front of a microphone and never stumble.
Yeah.
I've never heard you say, lose your train of thought or mangle your words. How do you do that? How does the brain allow you to do that?
I suppose it's just not practice, but just experience. It's just what you do. I mean, Tom will probably tell you, or people who've worked in radio, or maybe in television as well. If you're doing something live, it's live, and you've got to do it. If you're recording something, I always used to find on the radio, if I'm recording something, 5 or 6 takes, or I got that bit wrong. Just doing it live, it's got to be live, so you've got to do it. And for the first sort of 5 or 6 years at the Amex, all I used to do was the build up and then the halftime stuff. And we had an extra person up in the gods, or a couple of people who used to do all the substitutes. I didn't do it, so it was a cushy job for me because once halftime was out of the way, I had nothing else to do. But then that person left, and we just thought, well, look, you're here, you can do it all. But we tried to train. That sounds like a terrible phrase, but we tried to do, Rich, you're going to be unwell at some point, or I'm not going to be able to do a match, so you need someone to step in. And we tried to get a couple of radio people to do it, and they couldn't. And I was surprised that they couldn't do it. And I was saying to them, look, all you've got to do with this link is think about where you're starting it. All I do at each link is, where does this link start and where do we need to get to? So it starts with, well, great to see that footage up on the screen there. Good win for the women's team on Wednesday. Now, of course, today we're playing Liverpool, so we've had some right cracking matches against Liverpool, none better than the one in 2024. Take a look at it. So it's from here to there, and that's it. But he couldn't do it. So when I am off now, brilliantly, we have Dave Beckett from Sky Sports who comes in, and Nick, who's the cameraman who I mentioned before. I don't know whether he does this on purpose, but I always, if I've come back, if I've been unwell, or I think up until 2 years ago, I'd never missed a match, but now I've missed a couple now. And I'll say to him, "Oh, how was it with Dave while I was away?" And he'll say, "Oh, Dave, he's a professional. He's brilliant, isn't he? He's just amazing. He's great. There's no problem when Dave's here." And I'm like, "Yeah, thanks. All right, cheers."
Do you have your own trade association now, or trade union? I thought it was a big moment in football when all the director of comms got together and started having meetings and almost formed a trade union. Is there a stadium announcers trade association where you go have a Christmas do and all that sort of thing? Well,
not so much Christmas do yet because we're all over the country, but when we were last at Wembley against Manchester United, the Manchester United, so the club announcers get asked to come down and do stuff at Wembley. And the Manchester United one is a legendary announcer who's been doing Old Trafford for hundreds of years. Sorry, Alan. It's called Alan Keegan. And we were both on the pitch next to each other, so we introduced ourselves. And he said, I do a podcast with the guy from West Brom. Would you come on our podcast? I was like, sure. So he gave me a card and we got in touch. And they do this podcast, which is the most niche podcast in the history of the world ever.
What a stadium announcers.
It's just stadium announcers from around the league talking about what they do for a living. And it has it doesn't have a lot of people listening to it. But it was great fun to do. And it was like finding your people. I likened it to, do you remember that story about the Japanese soldier in the war who was stuck on an island, didn't know the war was over.
Yeah.
And he was just out there on his own fighting a war that had ended 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Until a boat turned up one day. So, wars are all over. It's fine. And it was like I was out there doing my thing, and I didn't know that other people. I knew they were there.
So you found your tribe.
But now I found my tribe, and now we have a WhatsApp group, and I get laughed at. Look at the WhatsApp group; they're all going on about should we do this or how do you do that? What half-time games are you doing, and all this sort of stuff. So it's nice to be in touch with them all. Yeah. But it's
so who's the doyen? Or are you the doyen?
I am not the doyen. Don't be so silly. So the doyen is Alan at Manchester, and the fella called George, whose surname I don't know, who is the very famous Dower
at Liverpool.
At Liverpool.
Yeah, I could listen to him all day. Yeah. And he puts on a Beatles record, and then he asks somebody to move their car. Yeah. He's still old school, isn't he, George?
He's proper old school
institution.
Chappy.
Yeah.
And then the guy Paul at Spurs, just going back to when we had a blank slate, how are we going to do things? So fans may have picked up on this, but every match we start exactly the same way, and I nicked it out of White Hart Lane. And so the very first link will always be, good afternoon, welcome to the American Express Stadium, the fabulous home of the Albion. Today we welcome the players, officials and supporters of Liverpool for this Premier League match, which kicks off at 3:00. The reason we do that is that it gets me in a mind of, let's go, what we're doing, and it's a 15-second bit where we can get all the levels right, how's the mic sounding, etc., before we get into, here we go, and it gets the information out of the way. And so you just steal things off different people. Well, there was an occasion once where before we got to Premier League, things in Premier League are obviously a bit more serious is the wrong word, but we used to do every first link we used to do from the centre spot, and then we've been asked not to go on the pitch anymore. Fair enough. But we used to do every first link for many years on the centre spot. And there was one day, again, this is about doing things wrong once, and you'll never do it wrong again. I'm standing on the centre spot, Tim's in my ear, right, 2 minutes, the adverts are playing on the big screens, right, 2 minutes to your first link, Rich, fine. I'm talking to the cameraman, and we're going through the schedule of where we're going to be. Where should we do this link? Oh, well, let's go to the East Stand, and we'll do that, and let's see if we can get to the North Stand, and blah, blah, blah. 30 seconds, yeah, fine. So he steps back. I'm on the centre spot, going through, well, I'm going to say this, going to say that. Okay, we're live, 3, 2, 1. And I can see me come up on the big screen. And do I have a microphone? Don't have a microphone. I'm standing there going... And I run off. There's a fantastic some footage of the cameraman following this idiot running off the pitch down the tunnel, grabbing a microphone, running back, and then trying to do the first leg like, welcome to... It's just great. So brilliant. I never forget, you forget a microphone once, and now it's check 3 times every match. Check, 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 check.
Yeah, well, it's a job with its pitfalls. Final frontier, I reckon, Rich, is to get a university degree course in stadium announcing.
Yes.
When you've done that, you've really made it.
Well, I'm thinking you can get one of those PhDs where you can apply because you've worked in the industry for so long. Exactly. You can get it back. So I could be Dr. Richard Reynolds, which would be quite nice to have.
Exactly. Well, the stadium would be a very strange place without you.
It would indeed.
You are the voice of the club. So
can I just say something?
Yeah.
That you never stop learning, and I want to thank Mr. Murray over here, because he mentioned earlier, he was sat next to me at a match on Sunday when we played Crystal Palace, and we don't want to talk too much about that match. But I said after the 3rd goal had gone in, I said, that's it. I said, if Crystal Palace score another goal, I'm not announcing it. And I was serious. I'm not bothering. I'm not announcing it. And Glenn Murray turned around to me and went, don't be petty. He said, don't be petty.
It was like sitting next to a school child.
It was. I said, that's it. I'm not announcing any more of their goals. Probably won't even do any more of their subs. And he just said, don't be petty. And I thought, what a very good point. Don't be petty. Be professional.
And then he went, and then he went, goal, so.
And then those ones like, oh, goal.
I think in 18 months, that's the first time anyone's ever thanked Glenn on this show. So have you enjoyed that, Glenn?
That's from my co-host.
I learned something from you, Glenn.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. You're welcome.